Hi, welcome to the Strategy Operations 101 today. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. We have a lot to cover today. So we will mainly talk about what the strategy operations function really look like at a high level and what the day-to-day might feel like, as well as the core skill sets and the potential career path after this role. And then we will talk about the influence of AI throughout the presentation potentially. And I will try to leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end and for the group to chime in today. So my hope is that by the end of this session, you will walk away with enough clarity on whether strategy and operations is right for you. Okay. So before we jump in, one quick PSA. This session is being recorded. I might share helpful clips of the content from today for broader learning later. So please feel free to keep your camera on or off, whatever feels comfortable for you. And also engage in a way that feels most natural for you. Either chime in the comment or raise your hand and talk about your thoughts or ask your questions. A quick intro about me. For those of you who don't know me yet, hello again, I'm Yuji, and I've spent over the last 15 years in tech and digital advertising, building and scaling global strategy operations team at Meta and Reddit. And I also started my career as a management consultant at McKinsey. These days, I work as a career and executive coach, supporting people as they transition and expand possibilities in their life and career. So if you'd like to work with me beyond today's session, I will also cover more details at the end of the session. Let's start with the basic. What is a strategy and operations function? I will be honest, this question gives me a pause every time my friend asks me what I did in my job. And it's hard to summarize in just 1 to 2 sentences. And this is what I came up with, right? I think at its core, strategy operations sits right in the middle of leadership vision and frontline execution. And what our role really does is to ensure the business focus on the right things and can scale effectively, right? Not only now, but also in the long term. So there are 2 essential parts to the job. One is the direction, and then the second is the execution. One thing I'd like everyone to keep in mind is there is no universal S&O job. I will say it again. There's no universal S&O job, right? And then that's because of a few reasons. First of all, the scope and the structure could vary really widely by company. So for example, in some organizations, S&O might sit directly within the sales organization, while in others, it might operate more like an independent arm right under COO, and it will support multiple business units. At larger companies, S&O might only focus on the commercial, the business, or the sales side of the house, while the product and the user growth strategy might be covered elsewhere by other functions. But at a startup or smaller companies, the S&O, or they may call themselves biz ops, sales ops, rev ops, and there are many names that speak to the same function. They might cover everything, right? They might sometimes even play a role of sales in smaller startups. And then even within the same companies, the responsibility can really differ by the individual team. Some role might be embedded more in the business as a business partner, and they will be directly aligned to a segment of the business or the vertical of the business. So back in the Meta or Reddit, we would segment the business by the industry, right? We might have clients who has a CPG business or does business in technology or in media, in entertainment content, right? Or we might segment the business by the size of it. There are enterprise level, there are medium size, there are SMB, long tail type of clients. So the business partners will be directly aligned to the sales team who specialize in those segments, and they will have arguably much deeper stakeholder relationship than those folks probably working in centralized teams. And that they usually own specific programs, but have a much wider impact cross region, cross business units, cross function likely, right? So the specific role will have a very different responsibility and also day-to-days, even in the same company. And then finally, the work can evolve. It can evolve alongside with the company, alongside the technology, like AI today is revolutionizing everything, and it's probably changing the traditional S&O roles. And also, quite honestly, the role could evolve with you. So if you want to be intentional, you could actively shape your own journey by choosing the project that you are passionate about, to stretch your own skill sets and to take on opportunities that will help you to further grow in your career. And we will talk more about that later, okay? All right, so now let's talk about what the strategy operations work really feel like. So this is what I usually say when I'm talking to candidates or when I'm talking with my team about, the future of our role. I really think a successful S&O professionals share a doer mindset. That means we are always thinking like an executive and executing like a builder. And let's break it down, what that means, right? Thinking like an executive means that we're constantly wearing multiple hats and asking big questions as if we were the CRO, CFO, or COO, right? And quite honestly, we are often in the seats, the back seats, probably advising them or helping them, being a sounding board to them, asking those questions. Things like, how can we grow our business 10x from here? Where do we need to make those big investments? And for those to be successful, what trade-offs do we have to make right now? And also equally importantly, if not more importantly, is how do we turn those into reality? What needs to exist operationally, technically, or organizationally to make this real and scalable? Okay. And to execute like a builder, we are in the role to make those things happen as well. So that could cover a very wide range from big picture thinking to the unglamorous details. So I often break down our work into those three key dimensions. You don't have to worry about all the bullets here. I'm happy to explain them later if you're interested. But this is just to give you an idea on what those core pillars might be, right? So on the very first, the left-hand side is a strategic planning part. And many consider this to be the most sexy part of this job. That could include setting long-term vision, setting strategic framework to segment the clients, to decide which country we might want to enter next, right? How do we design our pricing? How do we design our organization? And annually planning for the big goals, the resources. And this work typically are very similar to the consultants type of role, but it has a more operational rhythm to it in a company. And then the second part in the middle is the operating rhythm, right? Once you've made those big plans, how to make those things happen in the days of the company, in the days of the organization. And this is the heartbeat of the business. It often takes 50 to 80% of our job, to be honest. So that could include revenue reporting, forecasting, right? Quota setting for the sales team, KPI tracking for different organizations, business reviews, basically everything that could tell us how the business is actually performing. And the last but not least, on the right-hand side is the foundational support. Those are the plumbing work of data quality, the dashboards, the tools, the systems, right? Many think this is probably the least sexy part of the job, but it's super, super important. And I would argue that with AI, this could become a really powerful and interesting area, right? Enabling team to work faster, smarter, and at a much bigger scale. So with that, what would the day-to-day look like, right? How would your work span across those three pillars? This really depends on where you are in the business cycle or with your stakeholders, with your particular business. One day you might be brainstorming a new market entry. The next day you might be deep in Excel models, building decks, building documents, right? Validating data. And some days might be very meeting heavy. You might be doing the regular business reviews, which happens potentially weekly. You might be having an alignment conversation on big decisions, or you might be resolving conflict between sales teams. Right? I often say we might sometimes act with a force head of a coach in our job. And other days, you might be busy with the fire drills. It can be very intense. There are a lot of highs and lows. But for many people, this variety is probably what makes the role also exciting. Okay, so before we talk about skill sets and potential career paths, I want to summarize a few wisdom from the field that folks who joined earlier on the call saw from the video, and also plus the learnings from my own career. Here are a few truths I think that's not often talked about. First of all, strategy and operations is a really incredible, powerful career accelerant. And this is probably why many of you are also here in the room, hoping to learn more about the function, right? So whether you want to grow into the leadership or pivot into another function, or eventually build something of your own, this is a really helpful experience, a really helpful career stepping stone. But here is something also very critical that people don't often talk about is the job looks very analytical and very operational on the book, but it's actually a deeply human job. You're constantly working with people. Solving problems often means navigating their emotions, their incentives, their unspoken needs. And the great S&O professionals are often strong in interpersonal skills and often act like a coach, as I said before. And there are a few common traps to also watch out for. Because S&O does so much, it can easily become a catch-all function if you don't know how to set your boundary, you don't know how to say no. And the high-impact work can often become invisible if you or your leader are not intentional to market it, to surface the impact, right? And then the work can be repetitive. Like I said, in the operational rhythm, that's the very core of the job. There's weekly revenue reporting forecast. There's a quarterly setting quota. There's annual planning. And in some places, arguably, it's becoming always on planning. So you're constantly repeating the cycles, no doubt. But your agency matters, right? Do you simply repeat what you've done in the same way every single time? Or do you try to continuously improve, look for ways to scale, automate, or innovate, right? So being intentional and having a growth mindset is really key in the long-term success in this role. And probably in a lot of roles commonly as well. And I often encourage people to be transparent with their leaders about what they genuinely enjoy and what they want to get better at. So this way you can actively shape your journey with them, create opportunities that match your strengths and also stretch your skills into new areas. Here are all the core skills that you might be tested on in the interviews. But mostly importantly, these are the skills that will also help you be successful in the role over the long term. So on the left-hand side, you've got the harder skills, right? The analytical, the modeling, the execution. And on the right-hand side, I think that's what differentiates folks in the long-term success. That's the judgment, the business intuition, the influence, the leadership, right? The higher you go, the more these things would matter. And I think AI can never replace those skill sets. And if anything, they make those more valuable because the left-hand skills, AI can probably do a lot. And I think the entry level, the threshold for people to get into the door is lower with those skill sets now because AI can help. But again, The right-hand skill set is what really makes you different, what really supports you for the long-term success. And now let's talk about career paths. A lot of people in the registration ask about what the potential career path could look like, and also how to get into the role, right? So I like to imagine it as a tree because it has many branches that you can grow into. So you could choose to grow vertically within the S&O role. You may grow into the leadership, or you may try a specialized area, right? I think with the AI-enabled world and also the philosophy of flattening the management layer, we will probably see more demand for super ICs in this function. And you can also choose to switch into other roles, right? And the range can be much wider than you think. So you could be a chief of staff, which is very close to S&O role, and you could grow into a general manager for a business. You could work in similar functions that's finance related, right? And you can jump to the product or marketing side of the house. It's less linear, but it's not entirely impossible. And it's very fun to work there, personally, I think. And then you can even become a sales manager. I've seen peers from my past who become really successful country managers or sales executives because they have that really well-rounded skill sets. And then someone may choose to go into VC, PE, consulting, or vice versa, right? Or you could eventually become a COO of a company or build your own. So I think most of these paths can actually work in both ways. So people can move into S&O if they've worked in those functions before. And some are easier, some are less straightforward, but I always say never close the door of possibilities for yourself. And on the note of possibilities, I think we are coming to the end of my formal presentation, and I will open up for questions shortly. If you are ever in need for further coaching, either to help you decide whether this is the right role for you, or you'd like help to shape your next career move, or grow in your current role, or support you to prepare for your dream job interviews, I'm here for you. So here are some ways that you can get in touch with me. You can scan the code on the page, book a discovery call with me, or email me. I have those links on my LinkedIn page if you ever need to find them again. And also I started to write a Substack. So I share resources on an ongoing basis, my own reflections or future group coaching opportunities or workshop like this one. So if you'd like to stay in touch, you're welcome to subscribe to my Substack as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to open up for questions. Feel free to raise your hand in the chat or drop your question in the chat.